Ah, yes. How do we describe the financial side of the antiques and collectibles trade in 2025? How about this? You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy than the antiques and collectibles trade in the year 2025. Now, for those of you unaware, I started this channel towards the tail end of 2019. It was like 5 or 6 months right before the pandemic hit and we were all in lockdown. I remember, I think March 2020 was when the lockdown started, and I was already on like month 5 or 6 of this particular YouTube channel. And at that particular point, it was very interesting because we saw a lot of money flow into the trade, and we had a lot of speculative bubbles, speculative crazes come and go. You had the graded video game boom and then bust, or even now, if you do an analysis of the graded video game market, prices are nowhere near the high price points that they were soared to back around 2021, 2022-ish. If we look at the vintage comic book marketplace at present time, it's pretty much in the toilet. Don't get me wrong, it's not dying, but prices are nowhere near their all-time highs, and there's less money flowing into that market at present time. Now, ironically, on the flip side, you have coins and currency, which is holding its own. Some of those prices are still trending upwards. You have graded vintage toys and play sets from the 1980s, 1990s. They're hitting all-time highs right now. And you have a lot of the speculators out there that are clamoring for modern era Pokemon products. And they're being resold on the secondary market almost as quickly as the Pokemon company can produce them at insane markups. So this is all coming together to where we kind of have to talk about the behavioral financial aspect of the antiques and collectibles trade. So what I want to talk about today is FOMO, fear of missing out, and also the psychology of bad investment decisions. So if you're not aware, I want to say literally now, it's been about probably 10 years where pretty much YouTube, social media in general, has been a major part of the antiques and collectibles trade. I mean, you can't go on TikTok, you can't go on Facebook or any of these online forums without coming across content being created by either a speculator, an investor, a dealer, a reseller, somebody that is active in the antiques and collectibles trade that is trying to get you to see their point of view or offer a perspective about investing and possibly speculating in these markets. Whether it's over the short term, as in the case of like eBay thrifters reselling, or if it's over the long term, where people are stating, you know, you can park money in the antiques and collectibles trade, and if you buy right over the long term, it can be a good diversification hedge or investment. Now, obviously, I strata both those two sides of the equation. I partake in short-term speculation for profit, and I also do advocate, if you understand how these markets work and you want to diversify into these markets, you can make money over the long term. But there are significant headwinds and significant risks to attempting to invest in these markets over the long term that you have to be aware of. And the biggest pitfall that I see, that especially a lot of younger collectors, a lot of more, I hate to say this, more naive speculators that don't have a lot of years, that don't have a lot of experience under their belt, they tend to fall into a series of traps that kind of keep them stuck and make their situation worse. And when I say situation, I'm talking about their financial situation. So what I want to do first is talk about the 3 types of behaviors that are caused by FOMO, fear of missing out, that generally lead to negative outcomes. So the first thing that FOMO causes one to do is they ignore risks to pursue possible short-term gains. Now, let's say that you really don't have anything going on in your life at the moment. Let's say that maybe you make very little income at your job, or maybe you are a minimum wage worker. Right now, if you can go to Costco, if you can go to Walmart, if you can go to Target when they're putting out new Pokemon products, even if you have to push a 13 or 14-year-old kid out of the way to get them, you can flip them on eBay, on other online sites for a significant premium. Now, this may seem at present time like this is the norm. Make no mistake, this easy money isn't going to continue indefinitely. This market will change. This market will evolve. And a lot of these starry-eyed speculators that are right now willing to pay a premium for a lot of these Pokemon products will eventually move on. Whether it's to other Pokemon collectibles, whether it's to other markets, or they will leave the market entirely. If you actually do a study, and I've said this before early on in this channel, you need to understand that collectors are not made. They are born. The desire to collect among certain people is innate, meaning they're born with that mentality, that makeup, that desire. There are other people that get into these markets for just a short period of time, realize it's not for them, or they lose a significant amount of money, or sometimes they make a little bit of money, but either way, they leave the trade. These are pretty much called casual enthusiasts. Sometimes we call them casual collectors. They're just people that have a passing interest in this. It seems interesting. Maybe they watched American Pickers or Pawn Stars or Storage Wars and they want to give it a go, but it's really not within their DNA. Collecting is in the DNA of a collector. It's not something you can teach somebody if they don't have that desire to collect. This is why right now, among younger generations specifically, there is a rise in the desire of minimalism, meaning there is this desire to not have overabundance in their lives. And that's why if we look at the long-term trend, it is showing that there is an argument to be made where younger collectors, younger individuals are moving away from collecting. Now, we don't know how this is going to pan out. Obviously, if we're just looking over a period of 5, 10, even 15 years, that's really not a long-term trend at this point. And you also have to look at the financial implications of this. Younger individuals typically do not have enough disposable income to pretty much afford some of these higher-end collectibles, some of these items that are now trending to all-time price points. So that has to be taken into account as well. But overall, you cannot teach someone to be a collector. Either they have the desire or they don't. What you can do, like what I do on this channel, if you have the desire to speculate, collect, or invest in these items, I can cultivate that and show you the fundamentals so that you can at least be more successful, whether it's over the short term or over the long term. Now, unfortunately, when we talk about FOMO, fear of missing out, a lot of you guys watch a lot of these social media influencers that fill your head with pipe dreams and Ponzi dreams. And a lot of you are not able to open up your mind long enough to have critical thought, to understand that there is a right way to invest and speculate in these markets, and there's a wrong way. And if you go all in, falling for FOMO, this is where you tend to ignore risks and pursue possible short-term gains. And that doesn't always work. Another thing that FOMO causes the average person to do is chase trends and phantom gains without doing proper market research. You know, if somebody comes to YouTube and says, oh my God, you gotta buy this product. It doesn't matter if it's Lego, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, Nintendo video games, whatever it is. You gotta buy this product right now because it's going to sell out. A lot of you will take action in that direction rather than taking a step back and analyzing, okay, why am I buying this? What's my exit strategy here? How does this fit into my vision for my portfolio, financial or otherwise? Because believe it or not, those of you that come to me and tell me that you're investing in these markets, you are creating then a collectible investment portfolio, whether or not you realize it. And if you're doing that, you have to have an exit strategy. Another thing that FOMO does that generally leads to negative outcomes is most of these individuals, they end up going all in They overindulge in a single opportunity purely out of excitement or hype. And this is why I tell you guys, I have a lot of people that come to me and say, Sean, you don't understand the Pokemon market. Sean, you don't understand the video game market. And this is why a lot of you guys, in certain instances, lose your proverbial asses. That's why during the run-up and great at video games, I told you guys, I came here, turned on my camera, and told you guys point blank, I'm selling into the hype. This is awesome. If you have this stuff sitting anywhere, get rid of it. Now's the time to sell it. You're going to maximize your gains because the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters out here that do not understand how these markets work, who are suffering from FOMO, they're now going to be your opportunity to build wealth and get it quick and get it big. And that's really what happened. I mean, I was selling into the market, I'll just state this, to the tune of 6 figures when the great at video game bubble popped and went to the stratosphere. It was amazing for a lot of us. And I felt bad because there were people that were under the guise of FOMO coming to me going, well, Sean, everybody loves Super Mario. Everybody loves Zelda. Everybody loves Metroid. To a certain degree, yes, if you're into video games, you probably have an emotional attachment to those characters. But using the word everyone, that's a sign that tells me that you guys are really drinking the Kool-Aid. You guys are really getting high on the hype. You know, I've said this. One of the things that the internet does very well is everybody on the internet, whether you're a content creator or you're a fan of a specific content creator, you're siloed in a certain category. And I've said this before. I'm kind of siloed in between collectibles, finance, and ironically, the YouTube algorithm also sandwiches me in between men's advice, because sometimes that comes up in some of my Q&As. Whereas other content creators are completely in like the Pokemon group, where they just talk about Pokemon, investing in Pokemon, how everybody loves Pokemon, what Pokemon's doing on the open market, how you can invest, speculate in that market. And don't make any mistake here. I'm not trying to have a judgment against these people. I have nothing against them. But overall, you got to understand, if you listen to that content 24/7, you're not looking at the flip side. It's just like, and I am going to go here, and I know this is going to be controversial, it's just like people that listen to misogynistic manosphere content each and every day and then wonder why their dating life sucks, why they don't have a girlfriend, even though they're probably eating right, they're probably going to the gym, but yet each and every day they go in front of YouTube and they listen to this horrible misogynistic content with god-awful dating advice and then wonder, how come women aren't paying attention to them? If you're too siloed in any one space on the internet, or especially on social media, you're probably not getting the full picture. This is why it gets very difficult for me to have respect for a lot of these social media influencers that just pop in popularity. And now all of a sudden they have like 500,000 subscribers, 1 million subscribers. And if you watch their content, it's the same type of advice day in, day out. And anybody who isn't part of that community, who just watches a couple of their videos, can dissect it and go, okay, this is why this group is struggling. They are only interested in hearing what they want to hear, and they're only interested in taking the advice that they think is correct, not understanding things are usually more gray than they are black and white. And that's my problem with the internet. Now, this is where FOMO can sometimes lead to the crowd mentality or also the herd mentality. And again, always remember that sometimes when you follow the masses, the M is usually silent, and in all actuality, you're just simply following the asses. And that's how you guys can get into trouble, because you end up buying high and selling low during market corrections. Case in point, as I'm recording this video, Wall Street over the last few days with the tariffs, with all the craziness happening, has either gone up 1,000 or 2,000 points or has dropped 1,000 to 3,000 points. I mean, the graph looks insane. And I have a lot of people coming to me going, well, Sean, I'm panicking. You know, you started this channel, and one of your core cruxes is that people should invest in an S&P 500 index fund or a total stock market index fund. Well, right now, markets are crumbling. And what is it that I'm telling you guys? I'm slowly accumulating a bigger position in these markets because I'm here to tell you, 5 years from now, no one's going to give a rat's ass about stupid tariffs that were put together in some type of stupid plan in the basement of the White House in March or April of 2025. 5 years from now, we're going to be worrying about other things. The market's going to recover. The market's going to do what the market's going to do. So why are we even having this discussion about 3 or 4 days of negative returns on Wall Street? If we get in my DeLorean time machine and we go back to the 2000-2001 recession when the dot-com stocks crashed, are you aware? For literally almost 13 years straight, if you look at a graph from the year 2000-2001 all the way to 2013, the financial crisis is included in that happened in 2008-2009, of course. Are you aware the S&P 500 index was negative and flat those 13 years? I consistently invested in it every single week. And guess what? Today I'm sitting pretty because I always knew over the long term, after a 10 to 20 year period, it's going to eventually go up in value. And that's what it did. And from 2013 on, it kept going up in value. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, the S&P 500 index got a little too hot there. We kind of needed a pullback. So that's why I'm not losing any sleep or worried about these tariffs. But if you have a crowd mentality and you're listening to a lot of these idiots on the internet, oh my gosh, I got to clear out my position. I got to sell everything. Look, I'm here to tell you, an S&P 500 index fund or a total stock market index fund cannot go to zero. If the complete stock market goes to zero, I got news for you. Your money, your gold, everything that you have is going to be worthless. We're going to have more problems than you can even fathom at that particular point. So that's why I tell you, if you put together a plan and you're not going to succumb to FOMO, and you follow that plan through thick and thin, you should do okay, as long as you understand the fundamentals and the reason why you bought the investment to begin with. Now, another thing that crowd mentality or herd mentality can lead to is buying into overinflated asset prices as prices rise due to surging demand. I'm looking at you, Pokemon collectors. Okay? This is what happened with graded video games. Prices started to rise, and everybody magically came out of the woodwork and said, oh, that copy of Super Mario Brothers that I could have got like 5 years ago for $1,000, now that it's selling for $100,000, I want it. And this was always my question. Well, how come you didn't want it 5 years ago? 5 years ago, even before WADA came on the scene, video games were still being graded. They were graded by VGA. VGA just did not have the clout that WADA had. So now that WADA came on the scene, and again, we don't know what was happening behind the scenes, wink, wink, all of a sudden, everybody decided that $1,000 or $5,000 game that was always readily available is now worth $100,000. And you see why somebody like me spotted that and said, something's wrong here. This is not the way this is supposed to work. You guys are insane for attempting to invest in an item like that when prices are at all-time highs. That's FOMO. That's following the herd mentality. When you follow the masses, sometimes, in most cases, the M is silent. And all is what you guys are really doing is following the asses. Now, another thing crowd mentality can lead to is an increase in severe volatility as speculative activity ramps up. For those of you that were there during the COVID collectible boom, if you guys recall, I did a video, and the video was entitled, Do Not Invest in Marvel Trading Cards. At that particular point in time, we were all stuck indoors, the government was giving us all free money, and people were looking at things to speculate on. And one of the things that people started to speculate on were Marvel trading cards. Now, to be fair, I want to be very clear here. There are a small few handful of these cards graded by PSA 10 or even PSA 9 condition that do sell for a premium even today. Overall, though, investing in these cards, even in the year 2025, is a very bad idea. They are a very limited, niche, speculative market with very little organic collectability. Case in point, a lot of people keep comparing these cards to that of vintage comic books. Vintage comic books have a lot more organic collectability than mass-produced Marvel trading cards that came out of the comic book speculative bubble of the late 1980s and early 1990s. I want to make that very clear. That's why I was able to recognize that trend and tell people, do not put your money in that market long term. Today, 2025, if you actually do a price history of those cards from what they were selling for back when the pandemic boom started, when people started going nuts sending those cards to PSA, you will see that market crashed and burned for the most part. There are a few handful of cards that do still have a lot of value on the secondary market. But for the most part, that market is pretty much dead because it was never truly organic. I know a lot of people that were clients of mine in my consulting business during that time that had access to those cards. And I was telling them, send them the PSA, pay a premium to get them graded, and flip them right away on the secondary market. And some of those individuals cleaned up. I'm talking, I know people that made six figures in that market in just a couple of months' time. They got in, they got out, they got their money, and they said, haha, I'm done, got my money, made my money, don't care what happens here. And that market pretty much cratered. You guys have to be careful if you're falling for FOMO or if you're following crowd mentality. Now, another thing that FOMO can lead to, and this is very dangerous, overconfidence. And this is where I have a problem. Not with everybody. I want to be very clear here. But there are certain individuals that come across as being very egotistical, very narcissistic, especially in the Pokemon community. And it's unfortunate because a lot of these guys are only in their 20s. And this is really one of the first collectible booms that they ever experienced. Now, case in point, I've been active in the antiques and collectibles trade at the age of 12. In my 20s, I was very successful with the advent of eBay, with the run-up in prices in pre-Nintendo era video games. For those unaware, I talk about this a lot on this channel. Right around 1995, 1996, with the advent of eBay and the internet, and of course, if you guys remember, digital press was really big back then. This was before Nintendo age. It was basically a forum and a website devoted to classic video game collecting that was run by Joe Santilli, Sean Kelly, a lot of those guys that were very prominent in this market back then. Well, this sent a massive speculative bubble, a massive speculative spike into the values of a lot of pre-Nintendo video game systems. So Atari, Coleco, Intellivision, Vectrix, all these items started shooting up in value. Well, it just so happened that I was going into the market. I was buying this stuff at flea markets, yard sales, paying like $10 for some of this stuff, and just flipping it online, and I was making hundreds to thousands of dollars per week. Now, I was fairly confident in what I was doing at that particular point in time. And I knew in my heart of hearts that the trend was going to eventually end. And spoiler alert, right around 2004, 2005, that's when pretty much the market for pre-Nintendo era video games pretty much imploded on itself. And Nintendo, Sega, TurboGrafx-16, Neo Geo, that's when those systems started accelerating in price. And it makes sense because if we look at 1995, 1996, the Nintendo Entertainment System, the original Nintendo Entertainment System, debuted in 1985. So at that particular point in time with the advent of eBay, it was only like 10 years old. So it really wasn't considered vintage. If you were talking vintage video games back in the mid to late 1990s, you were most likely referring to Atari, ColecoVision, and Intellivision at that particular point in time. Well, once that bubble burst, I was very lucky because I knew to pretty much wind down my inventory. So I didn't get stuck holding a lot of, I don't want to say worthless, because some of this stuff still does have value today, but I will say worth less inventory than most people. Now, here's where I'm going with this. If YouTube was a thing back then, I would never ever feel comfortable going on YouTube at the age of 28, 29, saying, hey, I'm an expert in the video game market. I made all this money. Here's the receipts to prove it. I'm going to teach you guys how to do this and how to look at this market going forward. This is my problem with a lot of people in the Pokemon market. They don't realize that they stumbled upon something that they had an interest in. They got lucky for the most part, and now they're reaping the rewards. Instead, they're internalizing it, and they think now they're an experts in a lot of these markets. They think that they're going to be able to predict the ups and downs of this market going forward. And in my opinion, that's a recipe for disaster. Even me, guys, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I started in the antiques and collectibles trade at the age of 12. There are still certain markets that I get stuck on where it's like, hey, I don't know how to analyze this. I don't know where this is going to go. Where I will reach out to certain individuals, I'm not going to state names, that I really trust. And most of these individuals are like in their 70s and 80s years of age, where pretty soon I hate to say this, they're not going to be around much longer. But those individuals are always willing to help me. And I never get overconfident and say, I know what's going to happen in this market. I don't need any other outside help or assistance. Even other experts in the trade, if you read the books that I tell you to read on this channel, they're always engaging with other top tier experts. Case in point, I talk about art a lot on this channel. Now, I know enough about art to be extremely dangerous, if you get what I mean. Meaning I can go into that market, I can play in that market, I can eke out a profit. But if I'm going to go into that market, and let's say that I'm looking at something that's selling for 6 figures or more, I'm going to consult with experts. I'm not just going to say, hey, I'm Sean Cermick. I know these markets like the back of my hand. I'm completely confident. I can do anything. That's a recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, right now, we have too many people in a lot of these markets claiming to be quote unquote experts just because they got lucky, because they were wired in a way where they're obsessed with Pokemon, or they're obsessed with vintage toys, or they're obsessed with certain video games. And the market had an uptick, and now it went to their head where they're thinking, hey, I'm an expert. I can always predict these markets. I just got to keep buying, and these markets are always going to go up. And that's the problem with overconfidence. It leads to you believing that you can accurately predict market trends over the long term. Now, how many times on this channel have you heard me say the only constant in the antiques and collectibles trade is change? Yes, I am repeating myself here. Collectible trends are easy to predict over the short term, but quite difficult to predict over the long term. For instance, right now, Pokemon's popular. Pokemon's probably going to be popular 3 to 6 months from now. I don't know if it'll be the same degree as the insanity that we're seeing right now, where people are ripping apart Walmarts, Targets, and Costco's to get the latest sets. But make no mistake, it's very easy to predict the future 3 to 6 months out. But what if I told you, what's Pokemon going to be doing 10 to 20 years from now? If you can accurately predict that, I'm sorry, you're lying. You're bullshitting me. Because even me, I can't predict what sets, how much people are going to have an interest in Pokemon 10 to 20 years out. That is insane. Always remember, guys, that the collectibles market works the opposite from the financial markets. If you were to ask me, Sean, what's the S&P 500 index going to do over the next week? I would tell you, I have no idea. It's probably going to go up, down, sideways, or whatever. It's going to do what it's going to do. If you ask me, though, will the S&P 500 index most likely be higher 10, 20 years from now than it is today? I can confidently say, most likely the answer is yes. This is completely different than how the collectibles market operates. And this is why, if you understand this, this is why antiques and collectibles operate best as a diversification hedge. Because usually, unless we hit a major Great Recession, depression scenario, you're going to have financial markets that are going to do what they're going to do, but you're going to have certain collectible markets that are going to be up and down. And this is how you can profit. And if you really want to get technical here, if the financial markets are declining rapidly and you have certain collectible markets that are trending upward in certain cases, you could sell them, you could take that profit and put it into the financial markets. And then when everything recalibrates, recorrects, and the financial markets start going up, you'll profit from that. This is why I'm going to really reveal this now that we're 30 minutes into this video. Most people are not watching. Reserved investments, I got a secret to tell you. It's pretty much run like a hedge fund. That's pretty much what I do. I actually have a room in this house that has nothing but 3 computers and 3 different monitors in there. And all is what it does is the computers are always on. I go in there, I analyze prices. I even have my stock portfolios up, my financial assets, everything that I own. And I can give you an analysis as to where I am at any given time, how much money I'm making, what my percentage gain after factoring all of my asset classes in is for the year. And it has served me well. That's how I run reserved investments. Now, how do we avoid FOMO? Because we're 31 minutes into this video. Most of you aren't even watching at this point. That's why I wanted to do an ultra long video. I haven't been able to do an ultra long video in quite some time on this channel. This is how we avoid FOMO. First and foremost, you have to research some more, and be patient. You got to avoid relying on social media influencers and social media in general for information on making investment decisions. Most people tend to relate to content creators who exhibit confirmation bias. We've already talked about this in this video, meaning they tend to listen to content creators who share their same worldview and beliefs. Pokemon investors tend to listen to other Pokemon investors and speculators, and they consider any outside commentary as uneducated advice. That's why this channel gets attacked so much by a lot of these individuals. A lot of people need to realize that in order to be a good long-term investor, you have to be able to look at something from a critical standpoint and look at both sides of the equation, as well as everything in the middle, without a bias. And this is something that, unfortunately, in the year 2025 and beyond, seems to be very hard for most people. Now, another way we can avoid FOMO is to set concise investment boundaries and ask the following questions before investing or speculating on something. Why am I buying this? How will I sell it when it's time to sell? How will I know when it's time to sell? Does the investment align with my overall investment goals, or am I just buying this because some dude I found on TikTok who I think is really cool is pushing this, and I have now this Ponzi dream where I can buy this, profit from it, make a ton of money, and live his same lifestyle? Because I'm here to tell you, most social media influencers are fake, guys. Very fake. I have been on YouTube now since 2019, as I said in this video. This channel, believe it or not, is approaching 2.5 million views. I have interacted with a plethora of different content creators, celebrities, people that have reached out that said, wow, man, I watched one of your videos. I thought it was really good. And it's very interesting when I get to know some of these individuals, even if they're like a YouTuber that has over 1 million followers. It's very interesting to me how they present themselves quite different than how they appear on camera or on social media. It's almost like, and I'm not insulting anybody when I say this, please don't take it the wrong way, because I'm also on YouTube, guys. You got to understand that. But it's almost like going on a dating site and seeing a proverbial hot chick that is using like Instagram filters and then meeting her in person. That's why I tell you guys, not everything is as it seems. And we're going to talk more about that in other videos, because that's a completely other topic. And if we go in that direction, it's probably going to extend the length of this video another 30 minutes. Another thing you got to ask, am I comfortable with the risks involved? Is it a short-term play or a long-term play? You need to avoid making emotional decisions. You have to think objectively. What if, again, the masses are truly asses and they're all wrong? If you're following them, you're going to get slapped in the face with a stale donut. You should wait at least several days before taking action on any type of investment, on any type of action you want to take, whether it's in the antiques and collectibles trade or not. You need to focus on long-term gains and properly assess supply versus demand over the long term. Ask if you think you would still want to own this item or buy into this investment 1 year from now. What if the price goes down? What if the price goes sideways and does absolutely nothing? What if the price goes up? 5 years, 10 years from now, what's your plan? What are the possible maintenance costs to owning or buying this item or investment? What about the possible opportunity costs of owning the said items? You have to learn to diversify your holdings. This is why I keep trying to tell you guys, you cannot go all in on Pokemon or Magic the Gathering or gold, silver, crypto, whatever it is. You have to diversify. Even if you're investing in the S&P 500 index. Yes, you can keep 90% of your net worth if you want to in an S&P 500 index fund, provided you understand the risks and that you're buying into that index for 10 to 20 years or more. As long as you have an emergency fund so that you don't have to sell out of that index potentially when the market is down, thus taking a loss. So this is why I preach diversification on this channel. It allows you to balance risks across different asset classes. It allows you to reduce exposure to any one kind of asset or collectible. Now, always remember, alternate assets, such as antiques and collectibles, they have no underlying cash flows. They have extremely high transaction costs and are much easier to buy than to sell. Have an exit plan before you buy and expect the state of the market to change frequently. And always remember the golden rule. You can own the item in question that you are attempting to invest in. You cannot ever control the market that it is part of. Meaning, if you go to the market and comic books are selling for all-time high prices and you pay $5,000 for your favorite vintage Bronze Age key comic book, if that market tanks, guess what? You own the item. You do not control the item that particular piece is part of, meaning you don't control the market. That's all that I'm trying to say here. Now, I've already talked to you for 37 minutes here. I'm going to wrap this up. Always remember my two favorite quotes from the cult classic movie Fight Club. The first important quote is, "The things you own end up owning you." And if you don't believe me, watch an episode of Hoarders, watch an episode of American Pickers, and you're going to see examples where some of these people, they have a lot to learn about life. They've made some bad decisions, and the things that they have ended up owning them. And the result, I hate to say it, is the mediocre lives that some of these individuals live on a regular basis. And for those of you that watch this full video and you're still shaking your head going, you know, that guy Sean, he's crazy. He just doesn't get it. For those of you that don't want to take my advice, here's another quote from Fight Club that's really going to help you. It is only after we've lost everything that we are free to do anything. And some of you, if you think this video is bullshit, if you think I'm misleading you, if you think Pokemon is always going to be the greatest investment opportunity ever, I'm sorry to tell you, it is only after you've lost everything that I assure you, you will have 100% freedom to do anything. Thank you for watching. Have a great night. If you are subscribed to this channel, I'll see you in another upcoming video.